My name is Constance Lockhart, and I am 61 years old. And 3 months ago, on the third afternoon after I had buried my husband of 34 years, I sat down at the kitchen table in our small lake house outside Brainerd, Minnesota, and I plugged his cellular telephone into the charger I had brought down from the upstairs bedroom. And I waited for it to come back on, because there were 2 voicemails the hospital had told me had come in during the 71 minutes between when his heart stopped on the highway outside St. Cloud and when the paramedics had finally turned the phone off and put it into a small plastic bag and given it to me in the corridor of the emergency room. I had not, in those 3 days, been able to look at the phone. I had been able to look at his coat and at his shoes and at the small leather wallet that had been on the dashboard of the car, and at the gold wedding ring the funeral director had given back to me in a small velvet pouch on the afternoon of the wake. I had not been able to look at the phone, because the phone, in the small private way I had been married to my husband for 34 years, had been the one object of his that I had understood, without ever having had to discuss it, to be entirely his. And looking at it on the third afternoon after his death felt like opening a door he had not, in his lifetime, ever quite given me permission to open. I want to be honest with you before I tell you any of the rest of this, about why I opened it anyway. I did not open it because I suspected anything. I opened it because the hospital had told me there were voicemails on it that had come in after he had died. And the small administrative part of me, the part that had spent 37 years as a regional underwriting supervisor at a mid-sized insurance company in the Twin Cities, knew that those voicemails were going to be from someone who needed to be informed that he was gone, and that it was my job, as the widow, to inform them. I plugged the phone in. I waited the 11 minutes for it to charge enough to come on. I entered the passcode, which I knew because we had used the same 4 digits on every household device for the entire length of our marriage, the year of our wedding, 1991. The phone unlocked. The 2 missed voicemails were waiting in the small red bubble above the phone icon. I tapped the icon. The first voicemail was from a woman whose voice I did not recognize, who was crying very quietly, who said only, "Theo, sweetheart, I have been trying to reach you all afternoon. The older one is asking when you are going to be home for dinner. Please call me back when you get this. I love you." The second voicemail was from the same woman, 28 minutes later, who said, in the same voice but no longer crying, who had clearly by then been informed by some other channel of what had happened, who said, "Oh God, Theo, oh God. I do not know who is going to listen to this. I do not know if anyone is going to listen to this." If anyone other than Theo is listening to this, my name is Marilyn Coyne, and I have been Theo Lockhart's other wife for 26 years, and we have 2 children together. And I am going to need somebody to tell me what is happening, please, because the hospital will not give me any information because I am not on his emergency contact list. And I have been calling everyone I can think of, and I do not know who else to call. Please, whoever is listening to this, please call me back. Before I take you any further, I want to ask you to tap the like button below. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please do, because I am going to tell you the rest of this story tonight. And I want to know that I am telling it into a room that is, at least in some small way, listening. Leave me a comment below and tell me where you are listening from, because I have been telling this account in private to my sister and my therapist and to almost nobody else for 3 months now, and I am going to need to feel the weight of strangers in the room when I tell the part I have not yet said out loud. Now let me take you back. The lake house outside Brainerd had been in my husband Theo's family since the early 1950s. His grandfather, a man named Atticus Lockhart, who had been a regional manager for a small Minnesota grain cooperative across the middle decades of the 20th century, had bought the small property on the eastern shore of a quiet lake called Loon Hollow in 1953 and had built on the property a 4-room cabin with a small screened porch that faced the water. And the cabin had passed, in 1978, to Theo's father, Wendell, and from Wendell, in 2008, to Theo, who had inherited it as the only son, the way these things had gone in the Lockhart family for 3 generations. We'd used the cabin for 34 years of our marriage. We had driven up from our house in a quiet suburb of St. Paul on most summer weekends, and on a great many winter weekends, and on every 4th of July without exception, and on a particular Sunday in early October every year for the entire length of our marriage, which Theo had told me, very early on, was the weekend his grandfather had originally closed on the property, and which he had decided, before we married, was the weekend he would always come up to the lake, regardless of weather or work or family, to honor the small, private ritual of his grandfather's purchase. I had never resented that weekend. I had, in fact, come to love it, because the early October light on Loon Hollow Lake was the loveliest light I had seen anywhere in Minnesota in any season. And because Theo had been, on those particular weekends, his quietest and gentlest self, sitting on the small screened porch with a thermos of coffee and a paperback novel, watching the water, occasionally telling me a small story about his grandfather that I had heard before but had never minded hearing again. He had been, on those weekends, the man I had married. He had been, on those weekends, the man I had buried. I want to tell you about Theo, because in order for you to understand what the 2 voicemails on his phone did to the architecture of my entire adult life, you need to understand who I have spent 34 years believing I had been married to. Theodore Lockhart was 63 years old when he died. He had been a structural engineer at a mid-sized firm in Minneapolis for the entire 38 years of his professional life. He had specialized, across the back half of his career, in the structural review of older commercial buildings in regional cities across the upper Midwest, the kind of work that required him to travel, on average, perhaps 3 days every 2 weeks to small cities in Wisconsin, in North Dakota, in Iowa, in the Iron Range of northern Minnesota, in the small farming towns of southern Minnesota, in Duluth and in Mankato and in La Crosse and in Grand Forks. He had loved the work. I had never quite understood the work itself, although I had listened to him explain particular projects to me at the dinner table for 34 years, and had developed a passable vocabulary in steel frame analysis and seismic retrofitting that I had no use for anywhere else in my life. He had been a careful, patient, slightly shy man. He had been the kind of husband who had remembered every anniversary, who had brought me a small bouquet from the supermarket every Friday evening for 34 years, without fail, who had asked me on Sunday mornings what I would like for breakfast, and had then cooked exactly that, and who had said, in the late hours of long evenings when the house had gone quiet and the kitchen had been cleaned, and we had been sitting in the small den with a book each, "Constance, I want to tell you something. I love you. I have always loved you. I do not say it as often as I should." I had heard him say that sentence, in that exact phrasing, perhaps 400 times across 34 years. I had assumed, for the entire 34 years, that the reason he kept saying it was that he wanted me to know he meant it, and that the way men of his particular Midwestern Protestant generation expressed sustained love was through small, repeating phrases delivered at low volume in dim rooms. I had not assumed, at any point across those 34 years, that the reason he kept saying it was that he had a second household. We did not have children. I want to tell you that now, because it is going to matter for what comes later. We had tried, for about 4 years, in our late 20s and early 30s, without success. We had stopped trying around the time I turned 33. We had not pursued any of the medical interventions that were available even in the early 1990s, in part because the interventions had been less developed then, and in part because Theo had told me, very gently, on a particular Sunday afternoon walk in the spring of 1995, that he did not feel the need to push the question, and that he would understand if I did not feel the need to push it either, and that whatever shape our family ended up taking would be enough for him. I had said the same back to him. We had built a shape. The shape had been, on the surface, I had been allowed to see, a marriage of two careful adults who shared a comfortable house and a small lake cabin, and a slow, steady set of mutual habits, and a particular fondness for each other that had, across the years, deepened into the kind of long-married affection people in our generation had been raised to consider a successful outcome. I had not, in those 34 years, ever once suspected that Theo had wanted children, that he had ever wished aloud or quietly that we might have built a different shape. I had not suspected this because Theo had never given me a single reason to. He had been, in the home we shared, the most contented man I knew. The contentedness, I would learn in the 3 months that followed his death, had been the contentedness of a man who had simply been getting his other need met in another house, and who had therefore been able to come home to me, on the weekends he came home to me, without any of the pressure a less satisfied man might have brought through the door. I sat with the second voicemail for a long time before I did anything else. I want to tell you about that hour, because the hour is the part of this account I think most about now. I did not, in that hour, scream. I did not, in that hour, cry. I did not throw the phone, did not break anything in the kitchen of the lake house, did not call my sister Vivian in St. Paul to tell her what I had just heard. I sat at the small wooden table in front of the kitchen window, with the phone face up on the table in front of me, and I looked at the lake through the window, and I did the kind of slow, careful interior accounting I had spent 37 years doing in the underwriting department of a regional insurance company. I had spent 37 years evaluating risk. I had spent 37 years reading claim files. I had spent 37 years looking at the small, private documents of strangers and assembling from those documents the actual shape of what had happened in a person's life, and then writing a one-page summary of that shape for the people who had to make decisions about it. I was very good at this work. I had been promoted to regional supervisor at 41. I had retired at 58 with a small, fond send-off of a department that had relied on my particular gift for some years. The gift was the gift of staying calm in the presence of new information, and of not deciding too quickly what the new information meant, and of waiting until the information had laid itself out completely before I made any administrative decisions about how to proceed. I deployed the gift. I deployed it on my own marriage. I started a fresh page in the small spiral notebook I had brought down to the lake house in my purse, the way I had brought a spiral notebook with me to every meeting at every job I had ever worked. And I wrote, at the top of the page, the words Marilyn Coyne in block capitals, and underneath them, the words 2 children, and underneath them, the words 26 years. And I drew a small line under those 3 pieces of information, and I sat back and I looked at the page. 26 years. The arithmetic was immediate. If Marilyn Coyne had been Theo's other wife for 26 years, the second household had begun in approximately 1999, which was 8 years into our marriage, which was 4 years after the Sunday afternoon walk in the spring of 1995, during which Theo had told me, with such gentle, careful kindness, that he was at peace with our shape, and that he did not need a child to be a complete man. He had told me he did not need a child to be a complete man. He had then, 4 years later, started a second household with a woman who had given him, at some point in the years that followed, 2 of them. I sat with that piece of arithmetic for almost 20 minutes before I wrote anything else down. The arithmetic was not, in the way I had been trained to read these things, ambiguous. The arithmetic was a confession in numerical form, of a kind I had read in claim files perhaps 3,000 times in my professional life. A husband who is at peace with a childless marriage does not, 4 years later, start a parallel one in which children are produced. A husband who is at peace with a childless marriage stays in the marriage he has. A husband who starts a parallel household does so because he has wanted, the entire time, the thing the first marriage has not given him, and has decided, at some point, that the easier route to obtaining that thing is to obtain it elsewhere without telling the first wife, rather than to discuss the question directly with her. The Sunday afternoon walk in 1995 had not been a moment of mutual acceptance. It had been the closing argument in a small unilateral decision Theo had been making during the 4 years of failed conception. And the decision had been to stop trying with me and to keep the marriage with me as the public-facing structure of his life, while preparing, quietly, the architecture of a second arrangement under which the actual life he wanted could be conducted. I had been on that Sunday afternoon walk in 1995, in front of the small bridge over the creek behind the elementary school on Highmore Avenue, an unwitting party to the founding document of my own husband's parallel marriage. I had thanked him for being so understanding. I'd cried, very briefly, against his shoulder. He had held me. He had told me he loved me. He had walked me home. He had then, across the 4 years that followed, located a woman named Marilyn Coyne, had begun whatever the courtship had been, had moved her into a second house somewhere, had at some point arranged for her to bear him a child, and had begun, in a parallel calendar invisible to me, the life he had not had the courage to tell me he had wanted. I wrote the words 4 years under the earlier ones. I underlined them twice. I sat for another 10 minutes. I did not cry. I noticed that I was not crying, and I filed that fact away as a small, surprising piece of information about my own emotional architecture. The way I had filed away, in my first month of widowhood, the fact that I had not cried at the funeral either. I had not cried at the funeral. I had spent the funeral 3 days earlier, standing very still at the front of the small Lutheran church we had attended for 34 years, shaking hands with the long line of mourners who had come, listening to my sister Vivian deliver a kind, careful eulogy, listening to 2 of Theo's former colleagues from the engineering firm speak about his quiet brilliance, and noticing, in some small back room of my own consciousness, that I had not, in the 4 days between the phone call from the highway patrol and the closing of the funeral, produced a single tear, and that the failure to produce one was, I had told myself, a feature of the long, careful, Lutheran emotional discipline I had been raised inside, and was not, I had told myself, a sign of anything else. I am, 3 months later, no longer certain that what I had been doing during the funeral was being disciplined. I think now that what I had been doing during the funeral was waiting. I think some part of me had known, the entire time, that the story I had been told about my marriage was not quite the story of my marriage, and that the funeral was a piece of administrative theater being performed by an entire community on the basis of an account of my husband's life that was not accurate, and that I was not going to permit my own body to release the grief of his death until I had finished reading the actual claim file, the one nobody else in the church had been holding. I called Marilyn Coyne back the same evening. I want to tell you about that telephone call, because the telephone call is the thing about the last 3 months I think I am most proud of. And pride is a word I have a great deal of trouble using about myself in any context, and I am using it here, deliberately. I had decided, in the hour after I had listened to the second voicemail, that I was going to call her back. I had decided this not out of generosity. I had decided it out of administrative thoroughness. I needed information. The voicemail had given me 3 pieces of information, 3 of which had been precise and verifiable, and the fastest route to the rest of the information was through the woman who had left the voicemail. She had been, on the audio recording, in a state of considerable distress. She had also, on the audio recording, given me her full name without hesitation, which suggested either that she was unaware of how much she had to lose by being identified, or that she had calculated, in some part of her panic, that the situation had passed the point at which any further concealment would serve her interests. I suspected, on the basis of the second voicemail's overall composure, that it was the second of those two. I called the number from which the voicemail had come. The phone rang twice. A woman's voice picked up. She said, "Hello?" I said, "Marilyn, my name is Constance Lockhart. I am Theo's wife. I have just listened to the voicemail you left for him this afternoon. I am calling you back the way you asked someone to. I would like to know what kind of conversation you would like to have." There was a silence on the other end of the line for almost 6 seconds. I counted. Then she said, in a voice that had clearly been preparing itself for the possibility of this exact telephone call for some time, "Mrs. Lockhart, thank you for calling me back. I am very sorry. I am very, very sorry. I do not know what you have been told. I do not know what you knew. I'm going to assume, until you correct me, that you knew nothing. Is that the correct assumption?" I said, "Yes, Marilyn, that is the correct assumption." She said, "All right. I am going to need a moment." There was, on the line, the sound of her drawing a long, careful breath. The kind of breath a person draws who has been preparing for a difficult exchange for a long time and is now finally being permitted to begin. She said, "Mrs. Lockhart, I want you to know one thing before I say anything else. I asked Theo on at least 6 separate occasions across 26 years to tell you. The most recent of those occasions was approximately 14 months ago. He refused each time. I want you to know that. I did not refuse for him. I did not, at any point in 26 years, want this to be the way you learned. I had assumed, frankly, that he would predecease one of us in some scheduled way, and that there would be time to tell you in a controlled fashion. The way it actually happened was not the way I had wanted it to happen. I am very sorry that the voicemail was the channel. I had been calling him because the older one had a bad day at school. I did not know he had died until almost 90 minutes later. I called everyone I could think of when he did not pick up. I am going to need to apologize to you, Mrs. Lockhart, for a great many things over the next several conversations, and I am going to start with that." I sat with what she said for a moment. Then I said, "Marilyn, may I ask you some questions before you say anything further? I would like, if it is all right with you, to get certain pieces of information on the table before we discuss anything else. I'm going to do this the way I would do it at my old job. I'm going to ask short factual questions. I would like short factual answers. I am not asking them in any spirit of accusation. I am asking them because I have, until 90 minutes ago, been operating under a set of factual assumptions about my own life that turn out to have been wrong. And I would like to know the correct facts so that I can decide what to do." Marilyn said, very quietly, "Yes, Mrs. Lockhart. That is fair. Ask me anything." I said, "When did your relationship with Theo begin?" She said, "Spring of 1998. We met at a conference in Duluth. I was 31. He was 36. I said, "When did you start sharing a household?" She said, "Fall of 1999, 18 months later. I had taken a job at a small engineering firm in Bemidji. He visited me on the weekdays he had work in the region. We bought a small house together in 2001 when I became pregnant with our older son. The house is in my name only. Theo's name is on none of the mortgage documents and none of the deeds. He insisted on that at the time. I did not then understand why. I now do." I said, "Children's names and ages." She said, "Quinn Coyne is 23. He graduated from the University of Minnesota Duluth last spring. He is currently working at a small architectural firm in Duluth. Ellis Coyne is 16. He is a junior in high school at Bemidji Regional High School. Quinn was named, Theo told me when we chose the name in 2001, after a great uncle on his mother's side. I never met any of his family. I want to be clear about that. Neither of my sons has ever met any of Theo's family. I do not know whether what Theo told me about his great uncle was true." I said, "Marilyn." The name was true. It was the name of his maternal grandfather's brother. I met that uncle 4 times across our marriage. He died in 2010. Theo gave his name to his first son. Please continue. Marilyn made a small sound on the line. The small sound of a woman absorbing a single small piece of consolation she had not been expecting and had not, until that moment, known she had needed. She said, "Thank you, Mrs. Lockhart. I am going to remember that you told me that." She paused. She said, "What else do you need to know?" I said, "Marilyn, how much did the children know?" She said, "Both of them have known about you in the most basic terms since they were 9 and 7. Theo told them, at my insistence, that he had a first wife in the Twin Cities, that the first wife did not know about us, that the situation was very complicated, and that they were to never mention us to anyone outside our household. They did not, that I am aware of, ever mention us to anyone. Quinn, at 16, asked me what I thought about the arrangement. I told him I thought it was a great deal less than I had once hoped my adult life would consist of, and that I had stayed in it because I had loved their father, and because the actual cost of leaving him had appeared to me to fall most heavily on the two of them, and that I had been wrong about that, and that I had been telling myself a story for years to justify a thing I had been ashamed of since the day Quinn was born. I told him, when he was 16, that he was permitted to be angry with both of us about it, and that I would not defend his father against any judgment Quinn arrived at. Quinn told me, after some thought, that he was angry with both of us, and that he was going to find his own way to handle it, and that he did not want me to apologize again. He has not, since that conversation, allowed me to apologize. He has not, since that conversation, allowed his father to apologize either. He had not spoken to his father in approximately 10 months at the time of his father's death this week. I said, "Marilyn, I am sorry to hear that. Please continue. How much did the younger one know?" She said, "Ellis has known, in the same basic terms, since he was 9. Ellis took it differently. Ellis decided, at 9, that the situation was not his problem, and that his father's attention, when it was directed at him, would simply be enjoyed without being interrogated. Ellis has spent the last 7 years interrogating the situation more closely. I think he had been working up to a conversation with Theo about it. He had asked Theo, the previous Saturday, when Theo would next be at our house. Theo had said the following Friday. Friday was tomorrow. Ellis had been waiting. I want you to know that. Ellis had been waiting to ask his father questions that he is now never going to be able to ask him. I said, "Marilyn, I am very sorry." She said, I know you are." I said, "Marilyn, did Theo ever offer to divorce me?" She said, 3 times. The first time was in 2004. He said he had been thinking about it. I asked him whether he had told you he had been thinking about it. He said no. I told him not to bring it up to me again until he had told you. He did not bring it up for 9 years. The second time was in 2013, after Quinn's 12th birthday. I told him the same thing. He did not bring it up again for 7 years. The third time was during the pandemic, when we were all locked in our respective houses for a long time. He said he had been thinking about telling you, that the lockdown had made him reflect, that he wanted to be honest with you. I told him, for the 3rd time, that I would not have the conversation with him until he had had it with you. He did not have it with you. He stopped raising it with me at that point. I am sorry to tell you, Mrs. Lockhart, that I had concluded by 2022 that he was never going to tell you, and that the situation we had built was the situation we were going to keep, and that I had made a decision 23 years earlier that I was now going to have to live inside until one of us died. I had not expected him to die first, He was in better health than I was. I had begun in the last year to take very seriously the question of whether I was going to outlive him, and whether I would, in the event of his death, have any legal standing to identify myself to you. I had concluded that I would not. I had concluded, in fact, that the only correct thing for me to do in the event of his unexpected death was to remain silent and to mourn him privately and to never approach you and to allow you to have the version of his life you had been given. I want you to know that. I want you to know that the only reason you and I are speaking is that he had not turned the location sharing off on his phone. And Quinn had asked me to call him because Ellis had been crying. And I called 14 times before I left the first voicemail. And the universe arranged for the voicemail to be the channel. Because the universe is, in the end, more interested in the truth than I had been. I am very, very sorry, Mrs. Lockhart. I said, Marilyn, thank you. I am going to ask you one more question tonight, and then I am going to need to get off the phone because I have a great deal to think about, and I am not going to be able to think well in conversation. The question is this: what do you need from me? She said, I do not need anything from you, Mrs. Lockhart. I want you to understand that. I am not going to ask you for any part of the estate. I am not going to ask you for child support for Ellis. The two of us have been entirely financially independent of Theo since 2010. He paid for very little of our household across the entire 26 years, by my insistence, because I had wanted to be able to walk away at any point if I had become able to. And the only thing that would have given me the courage was my own financial independence. I have it. We are not going to need anything. What I would like, eventually, if you decide you are willing, is for you to meet Quinn and Ellis. Not soon. Not even soon-ish. Whenever you are ready. If you are ever ready. They are your husband's sons. They are not, by any reasonable accounting, your responsibility. But they are also not strangers, exactly. And there is no good word for what they are to you. And I would like, eventually, for them to be able to meet the woman their father loved on the public-facing side of his life. That is the only thing I will ever ask of you. If your answer is no, I will accept the no without further comment, and you will not hear from me again. If your answer is yes, I will set the schedule by whatever clock you set. I am at your disposal in this. I have had 26 years to think about how I would want this conversation to go if it ever happened. I had not expected to be permitted to have it. I am grateful you called me back. I told her I needed to think. I told her I would call her again within 10 days. I asked her before I hung up for her current mailing address, which she gave me, in a small town outside Bemidji called Loon Falls, 3.5 hours north of where I had been sitting. I wrote it down in the spiral notebook. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table of the lake house for another hour without doing anything. Then I called my sister Vivian. Vivian Lockhart Berenson is 65 years old. She is 4 years older than me. She is a retired professor of medieval history at a small Catholic women's college in St. Paul. She has been married for 41 years to her husband Harlan, who is a kind, quiet patent attorney with whom she has raised 3 children, all now adults, all of them living within an hour's drive of their parents' house, all of them deeply attached to their mother in a way I had for most of my adult life watched with the small, wistful affection of a younger sister who had not, in her own marriage, produced children of her own, and had not, until this very week, been able to articulate that this fact had been a sustained, quiet sadness across 34 years of an otherwise satisfactory life. Vivian picked up on the second ring. I said, Vivian, I have just discovered something. I am at the lake house. I am all right. I do not need you to come up tonight. I need you, please, to listen to me for the next 45 minutes without interrupting once. I will tell you everything I know in the order I learned it. At the end, I am going to need you to tell me what you would do. Will you do that for me? She said, Constance, yes. I am sitting down. Begin. I told her. I told her in the same way I had walked Marilyn Coyne through the questions, in short, clean, factual sentences, one piece of information at a time. I did not embellish. I did not editorialize. I did not, at any point in the 45 minutes, allow my voice to shake, although I noticed, near the end of the recitation, that my hand was shaking very slightly against the side of the coffee mug I was holding. Vivian did not interrupt. She did not, at any point, gasp or curse or make any of the small noises a sister might make on a telephone call of this kind. She listened. When I had finished, she said, Constance, I am going to come up to the lake house tomorrow morning. I am not going to argue with you about this. I'm going to come up tomorrow morning at 10, and I'm going to stay until you tell me to leave. Harlan will manage. I have already decided. I want you to go to bed now. I want you to eat something first. I do not want you to call this woman back again tonight. I want you to call her back when I am sitting at the table with you. Do you understand me? I said, Vivian, yes. She said, good. Constance, one more thing. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I want you to know I am not surprised. I want you to know I am not glad. I want you to know I have always loved him, on his own terms, the way I have loved everyone in your life on their own terms. But I am going to tell you now, before tomorrow, the single thing I have been carrying about Theo for some years, and I am going to tell it to you now because I am not going to want to tell it to you tomorrow morning over coffee with my hand on your arm. Theo took me to lunch in 2017, by himself, in the city, without telling you, on a day when you were at a conference in Chicago. He took me to a small restaurant in St. Paul I had never been to. He told me at lunch that he wanted me to know how much he loved you. He said it 3 times across the meal. He said it with a strange, small earnestness I did not, at the time, know what to do with. I noticed it. I did not tell you about the lunch. I noticed, also, that he never asked to have lunch with me alone again. I have been wondering, since the funeral, what that lunch had been about. I think I know now. I think he was building, in his own small, careful way, a record. He wanted me to remember, in the event of a future conversation he could not control, that he had told me he loved you. He wanted there to be a witness. I do not know what to do with that, Constance. I am giving it to you because you should have it. We will talk about it tomorrow. Go to bed. She hung up. I did not, that night, go to bed. I sat at the table for another 2 hours. I made another pot of coffee. I worked through every memory I had of Theo's last 26 years, and I categorized them in the spiral notebook by which household they had taken place inside. I made 2 columns. The left column was the column of memories I had been part of. The right column was the column of memories I had not been part of. The memories I was extrapolating, on the basis of Marilyn's information, into the calendar I had not known existed. The left column was longer, on the page, because I had 34 years of weekends and Sunday breakfasts, and Friday evening bouquets, and Christmas mornings, and quiet evenings in the den. The right column, when I tried to populate it honestly, was longer than I had wanted to admit. The Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday work trips, perhaps 50 a year for 26 years, of which, by Marilyn's account, at least half had been to Bemidji and Duluth, and the small Iron Range towns within driving range of the house in Loon Falls. The 2-week annual project review in Duluth every August, which had begun in 2003, 4 years after the Coyne household had begun, and which had always extended into a 3rd long weekend that Theo had explained every year with the small, careful phrase about going up the North Shore to clear my head. The October weekend at Loon Hollow Lake, which I had loved, and which had always begun on a Thursday afternoon, 2 days before I drove up myself on the Saturday, on the grounds that Theo had wanted to open the cabin alone and prepare it for me, and which I had assumed was a small ritual of solitude attached to his grandfather's memory, and which I now understood, with a slow, careful pain that was the closest thing to actual grief I had yet allowed myself to feel, had probably been the weekend he spent each year with the boys before I arrived, 3 hours north of the lake, in a house I had not known existed. I sat with each of these memories. I did not, sitting with them, conclude that all of them had been false. I want to be careful about that. I want you to understand that what I was doing in the spiral notebook was not the work of deciding that my entire marriage had been a lie. I had been a regional underwriting supervisor for 37 years. I knew that a claim file containing a single significant discrepancy did not invalidate the entire file. It invalidated, very specifically, the portion of the file the discrepancy attached to, and it required me to reevaluate the surrounding portions for plausibility, but it did not, on its own, require me to dismiss the file in its entirety. My marriage, on the evidence I had assembled by midnight on the third afternoon after my husband's funeral, had contained at least one significant discrepancy. The discrepancy had been a parallel household with a woman and 2 children, conducted across 26 years of the 34-year file. The discrepancy was substantial. It was not, however, the entire file. There had been actual love in the marriage I had been a party to. I had felt it across 34 years. The love had been, on Theo's side, real. It had also been, on his side, insufficient to keep him faithful to the structure of the marriage we had built. And it had also been, on his side, the kind of love that a man can hold sincerely for one woman while quietly maintaining the conditions of his own betrayal of her. Those 2 facts were both true. They were going to have to live in the same emotional architecture for the rest of my life. I was not going to be able to resolve them into a single clean verdict on the man I had been married to, and I was not going to try. Vivian came up the next morning at 10. She brought a small overnight bag and a thermos of coffee from the small shop on the corner of her own street, the way she had brought a small overnight bag and a thermos of coffee to me on every difficult morning of my adult life. We sat at the kitchen table. She read the spiral notebook. She did not say anything for almost 20 minutes. She drank the coffee from her thermos. She refilled my cup from the pot I had made earlier. Then she said, "Constance, may I tell you what I would do?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I would not tear apart the spiral notebook. I would do exactly what you have been doing, which is the work of separating the parts of the marriage that were real from the parts that were not. I would also, however, do one further thing. I would do a thing I am afraid you are too polite to do on your own, and that I am going to push you to do because I love you, and because I am the older sister, and that is what I am for. I would, today, look at the financial records. All of them. The bank accounts, the investment accounts, the retirement accounts, the insurance policies, the deeds, the house, the lake house, the small piece of land outside Faribault his father left him. I would, today, find out exactly what your husband had been doing with his money for 26 years, because the woman on the phone last night told you she had been financially independent of him since 2010, and I believe her. And I am also a historian, and I know that what people say about their motives is one kind of evidence, and what the money says about their motives is another. And the 2 kinds of evidence do not always match, and we are not going to make any decisions about anything until we have looked at both kinds. Will you let me sit with you at this table for the rest of today, and tomorrow, and the next day, until we have read every financial document in the house? I will not allow you to do this alone. I will read the harder ones. You will tell me what you see. We will write it down. Is that all right?" I said yes. We spent the next 4 days going through every document in the small 2-drawer filing cabinet in Theo's study in the lake house, and every document in the larger filing cabinet in Theo's study back in the suburb of St. Paul, to which we drove together on the morning of the 3rd day. I am not going to walk you through all 4 days. I'm going to tell you what we found. Theo had been, in financial terms, scrupulous. He had not, across 26 years, diverted any meaningful sum from our joint household to the Coyne household. He had, instead, paid for the small things he had bought across the two households out of his own personal discretionary account, a small checking account he had maintained since before our marriage, and which he had kept funded at roughly the same low level for 34 years, on the basis of an automatic monthly transfer from his salary. He had used that account, by the receipts and statements I assembled, for gifts to both households, for small travel expenses, for the modest contributions he had made to Quinn's college expenses, and for occasional payments to a small Bemidji florist whose deposit slips I had been seeing on bank statements for years and had assumed were for a colleague's secretary. The bulk of our joint financial life, the mortgage on the suburban house, the maintenance on the lake house, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolio, the small inheritances we had each received from our parents and combined into our shared estate, had not been touched by the second household. The estate, in other words, was entirely mine to inherit. There was no ambiguity in the documents. There was no second beneficiary lurking in any policy. There was no shadow account. Theo had, in the small, careful Lutheran engineer way he had organized everything else in his life, ring-fenced the two households financially with the kind of obsessive precision he had brought to seismic retrofitting. The result was that I was, on the morning of the fourth day, a perfectly ordinary widow with a perfectly ordinary estate. And the second household was, on the financial side, a wholly separate matter that had been conducted on a different set of books that did not intersect with mine. I cried on the morning of the fourth day for the first time since I had heard the voicemail. I did not cry, I want to be clear, out of relief. I cried instead out of a small, slow recognition I am still, 3 months later, trying to find the correct word for. The recognition was that my husband had spent 26 years of his life maintaining a careful financial wall between the two women he had loved, and had built that wall with the same patient skill he had built every other structure in his professional career, and had done it for the same reason he had done all of his other careful work, which was to protect the people he was responsible for from the consequences of his own decisions. The wall had not been built to protect me from Marilyn. The wall had been built to protect both of us from each other. For the entire 26 years, on the basis of a unilateral decision he had made, that we would both be better served by not having to know about each other. He had been wrong. He had been wrong about it with an obvious wrongness that has not, since I understood the wall on the morning of the fourth day, stopped being obvious. But he had also been, in his small, careful engineering way, sincere about the wrongness. He had thought he was protecting us. He had built the most expensive structure of his life on the basis of that conviction, and had maintained it for 26 years without ever once cracking. And the structure had held until the moment a phone died on a highway outside St. Cloud and a voicemail arrived in a house in northern Minnesota, and a woman in Brainerd plugged a phone into a charger 3 days later. The wall had been the work of his life. I had not, until I had seen the work in his own filing cabinet, understood that he had been working on it the whole time. I called Marilyn back on the evening of the fifth day. I told her, in the same short, clean, factual sentences, what I had found. I told her I was not going to be contesting anything she had said. I told her I had no financial claim against her household and no intent to make one. I told her I would not, however, be ready to meet her or her sons for some considerable period of time, and that I needed her to understand that the readiness was going to be on my schedule and not hers. She said, "Mrs. Lockhart, yes, of course. Whenever. Or never. I had not expected ever. I am at your disposal." I said, "Marilyn, there is one thing I want from you. I want to know whether Ellis is all right." She said, "Ellis is not all right. He is in the worst week of his life. He is 16 years old, and his father just died on a highway. He is going to be all right, eventually. but he is not all right this week, and I am sitting up with him most nights. I said, Marilyn, I would like, if it is acceptable to you, for you to tell him a thing. I would like you to tell him that I am Mrs. Lockhart, that I am the wife from the other house, that I am very sorry about his father, and that I am going to be in a position, eventually, to meet him if he ever wants me to.
I am not asking him to want to. I am giving him the option. He may take 20 years to take it. He may never take it.
I want him to know it is available. Marilyn was quiet for a moment. She said, Mrs. Lockhart, I will tell him tonight. Thank you. I'm going to remember this also. I said, Marilyn, one more thing. Quinn, the older one, is he safe? She said, he is safe. He has not yet processed it. He is angry. He is angry at his father, at me, at Ellis for being more obviously upset, at the universe. He is also 23. He is going to be all right. I said, Marilyn, the offer is open to him too. The same offer. He may take it whenever. He may never take it. Will you tell him? She said, I will tell him in the morning. Mrs. Lockhart, may I say one thing? I said, yes. She said, You are extraordinary. I do not know what other word to use. I said, Marilyn, I am not extraordinary. I am an underwriter.
I am very practiced at reading new information without panicking.
The rest of this is going to be much harder than I am making it sound to you tonight, and I am going to need a great deal of help with the harder parts. And the help is not going to come from you. But I do not see any reason to inflict on you or on those boys the parts of my own difficulty that are not theirs to carry. They are not the people who lied to me. They are people who were lied to alongside me, in different ways and with different costs, by the same man. We are not going to spend the rest of our lives on opposite sides of that fact. We are going to be on the same side of it. We may not ever be in the same room, but we are going to be on the same side. I hung up the phone. I sat at the kitchen table of the suburban house, the one Theo and I had bought together in 1993, and I cried again, this time for almost an hour. Vivian sat with me. She did not say anything.
She had, by then, been sitting with me for 5 days.
I want to tell you what has happened in the 3 months since, because the 3 months are the part of this account I think most about. I did not, in the first month, do anything about the larger picture. I made the smaller decisions. I notified Theo's firm of his death. I closed the small joint household accounts that were no longer going to be needed for joint expenses. I went through the closet in the master bedroom of the suburban house, and I sorted his clothes into 3 bags. One for the small Lutheran charity my sister and I had supported across our adult lives. One for a regional veterans shelter Theo had quietly volunteered with for 2 decades. And one small bag of clothes that had been particular favorites of mine, which I had not been able to part with, and which I had moved to a small chest at the foot of my bed. I went back to work on the part-time consulting role I had taken on in my 2nd year of retirement, helping a former colleague train younger underwriters on complex claim assessments. And I found, after the first week back, that the work was the thing that was holding me steady. I want to say that out loud. The work was holding me steady. The work was the small, daily, steady scaffolding that allowed me to do, in the evenings, the harder, slower work of the larger picture. I had told myself, in my first year of retirement, that I had been ready to leave the work behind. I had been wrong. The work had always been, more than I had understood at the time, the part of my life that did not depend on Theo's truthfulness. It had been the part of my life he could not, in a small, careful way, have touched, because it had never been about him in any direction. I was deeply grateful for it in those first weeks. I did not contact Marilyn again until the 7th week.
When I did, it was by handwritten letter, which I had drafted 3 times before I sent it.
The letter said that I had been thinking about her boys, that I had decided I would like, when she felt the time was right, to write each of them a letter myself, that I was not asking to meet them yet, but that I wanted them to receive, in writing, in my own hand, the small piece of information that the woman from their father's other life was not their enemy, and was not anyone's enemy, and was, on her own terms, sorry for what they had lost. Marilyn wrote back within 4 days. She told me yes. She enclosed each son's full mailing address. She thanked me again. She said, in a small, careful paragraph at the end of her letter, that Quinn had asked, when she had read him my offer, whether the offer was real, and that she had told him yes, and that Quinn had said only, "All right, let me know when she writes. I do not know what I am going to do with the letter. I want to receive it."
I wrote my letter to Quinn first.
I wrote it across 4 days. I did not show it to Vivian. I sent it. It was 3 pages long. I will not reproduce it here. I will tell you only that the last sentence of the letter was, "Quinn, I do not know what you and I are going to be to each other, if anything at all. I want you to know one thing about your father, and I am not asking you to forgive him for it, because I have not yet forgiven him for it myself. He named you Quinn, after a great uncle on his mother's side, who he had loved very much, and who had been kind to him during a difficult childhood. He chose the name with love. He did not, in choosing it, betray me. He used a name from his own family to honor you. That is not nothing. I am giving you that piece of information because I think you should have it." Quinn wrote back 2 weeks later, by ordinary mail, in his own handwriting on a small piece of plain stationery. His letter was 4 sentences long. He said, "Mrs. Lockhart, thank you for your letter. Thank you for telling me about the name. I am going to think about it for a while. I do not have anything else to say yet. Quinn." I keep that letter on the small writing desk in what used to be Theo's study and what is now my own. I wrote to Ellis next. I wrote a different letter. I wrote it knowing he was 16, and that 16 is an age at which any letter from any adult must be very short and must contain very few demands of any kind. I wrote, in my letter to Ellis, that I was sorry about his father, that I had been Theo's first wife, that I lived 3.5 hours south of him in a quiet suburb of St. Paul, that I did not know what kind of relationship, if any, we were going to be allowed to have, and that I wanted him to know one thing that his mother might or might not have already told him. The thing I wanted him to know was that his father, in the years before he had married me, had wanted children very much, and had told me he wanted children very much, and had then, when we had not had any, told me he did not need any, and had told me this so convincingly that I had believed him for 34 years, and that I was telling Ellis this, even though it was not flattering to me, because I wanted Ellis to know that his existence had been, on his father's side, the answer to a real, long-held wish, and that whatever else his father had done that was wrong, his father had loved having him for 16 years. And the love had been the truest thing his father had been capable of. Ellis wrote back 6 weeks later, also by ordinary mail. His letter was longer. He said in part, "Mrs. Lockhart, I have read your letter 11 times. I want to meet you eventually. I do not know when. I want you to know that. Mom said you said there was no rush. I am going to take you at your word about no rush. Thank you for telling me about the wanting children thing. Mom never told me that. I do not know if she knew." He had signed it Ellis. He had drawn, very small, in the bottom corner of the page, a small ink drawing of a paper airplane. I keep his letter beside Quinn's letter, on the same small writing desk. I have not, as of this evening, met either of them in person. I expect that I will, eventually. I expect that the eventually will be on a schedule I cannot yet predict.
I am not in a hurry. I want to tell you the last thing, and then I'm going to stop. In late September, 6 weeks ago, on a Saturday morning, I drove up from the suburb of St. Paul to the small cemetery in northern Minnesota where Theo is buried in the Lockhart family plot. In a quiet section of a small Lutheran cemetery his grandfather had been buried in 70 years earlier. The drive is 3 hours. I went alone. I did not tell Vivian I was going. I had decided I needed to do this part by myself. I parked at the edge of the cemetery. I walked across the grass to the small new stone the funeral director had finalized 2 weeks earlier, in the simple Lockhart family style. Name, dates, and a single line of scripture, which Theo had chosen for himself in his own will 3 years earlier, the way careful Midwestern men of his generation chose their epitaphs. The line read, "His mercy endureth forever." I stood at the stone for a long time. I did not put flowers on it. I had not brought any. The wind moved through the small pines at the edge of the cemetery. I said, out loud, in a small, clear voice, "Theo, I have called her back. I have written to the boys. I have read your files. I have understood the wall you built. I want you to know one thing. I am not going to forgive you. I am also not going to spend the rest of my life carrying you as a man I should not have married. I am going to carry you as the man I did marry, which is different. I am going to carry the parts of you that were real to me as the parts that were real to me. And I am going to carry the parts of you that were real to her as the parts that were real to her. And I am going to not pretend that those two sets of parts can be reconciled into a single clean man, because they cannot. You were two men. You were two men for 26 years. You were the man who brought me flowers every Friday for 34 years. And you were also the man who left a woman in a house in northern Minnesota raising 2 boys on a kind of half-time fatherhood that hurt all of them, and that you never had the courage to either fully commit to or to walk away from. Both of those men were you. I am 61 years old, and I have, by the actuarial tables, perhaps 25 years left. And I am not going to spend them either defending you or destroying you. I am going to spend them instead building the second half of my life on the basis of an honest reading of the first half. The honest reading is going to take a while. I am not in a rush. There is something I want you to know, and I want to say it out loud while I am here. You missed the boys. You missed Quinn. You missed Ellis. You missed, by your own decisions, 26 years of being the kind of father you had clearly wanted to be. You did not get to have them as your full sons because you had decided, in your own small, careful way, that you wanted them and us at the same time. And you were not honest about it with anyone. And the cost of the dishonesty was the most expensive thing in your life. You did not lose me the most. You lost them the most. I want you to know I understand that. I think you would have known it too if you had been given another 20 minutes on that highway. I think the last thing you would have wanted to say, if your heart had given you the chance, was that you were sorry. I am giving you, on the basis of nothing but my own decision, the credit of believing that you would have said it. I am not going to require you to have said it. I am going to grant it to you. That is the only thing I am going to grant you. The rest of the work is mine to do. I walked back to the car. I drove home. I have not been back to the grave since. I do not expect to be back for a long time. I want to tell you what I have learned, although I am only 61, and the lesson is, if I am honest, the lesson of one specific marriage, and I am cautious about pretending it generalizes. What I have learned is that the most expensive secrets of a marriage are not the ones the unfaithful spouse keeps from the faithful one. the most expensive secrets are the ones the faithful spouse keeps from herself.
I had known for at least 11 years that something in my marriage was not what I had been told it was. I had not known what. I had refused, every time I had bumped against the small, steady inconsistency, to do the underwriter's job of writing down what I was bumping against and following the bump to its source. I had not done this because I had been afraid of what the source would be. I had been a careful woman in every other domain of my life. I had been an exemplary underwriter for 37 years. I had refused to be one in my own marriage. The refusal had cost me 11 years of the wrong story about who I was married to. And it had cost Marilyn Coyne 11 years of being permitted by Theo to remain in an arrangement she had told him repeatedly across that time she wanted him to dissolve. And it had cost 2 boys I had never met 11 years of a part-time father whose absences could have been resolved if a single one of the adults involved had been willing to put down the small, careful family lie they had all been holding. The lie, in the end, had not been Theo's alone. The lie had been a structure that had required at least 3 adult silences to maintain. Marilyn's silence had been the silence of a woman who had told herself for too long that her choices were limited. Theo's silence had been the silence of a man who had told himself for too long that the structure he had built was protecting 2 women, rather than imprisoning 2 of them. My silence had been the silence of a woman who had told herself for too long that asking would be impolite. We had all of us, in our different, careful ways, made the structure possible. The structure had stood for 26 years because all 3 of us had agreed, without ever explicitly agreeing, that it was going to. It had stopped standing the moment a phone died on a highway and a voicemail arrived in northern Minnesota. But the truth is, it could have stopped standing on any morning, in any of the previous 26 years, if any one of the 3 of us had been willing to say out loud the thing we had each been knowing privately. None of us had been willing. I think about that now, every day. I think about it especially in the early afternoons, when the light comes through the front window of the suburban house at the same angle it has come through that window for 34 years. And I sit in the same chair I have always sat in. And I think about the woman I might have been if at any point in those 11 years I had simply written the question down in a spiral notebook and pursued it with the same patient competence I had pursued every claim file at my job. I had not done it. I do not, in the 3 months since, regret not having done it as much as I had assumed I would. The not doing had given me 11 additional years of a marriage I had loved, on terms I now know were not the terms I thought they were. I am not sure that the 11 years had been a worse outcome than the alternative would have been. I am, in fact, fairly sure they had been a better one, given that the alternative would have required Theo to make a decision he had not been capable of making, and would have required me to receive that decision at 50 rather than at 61. And at 50, I would not have had the underwriter's distance from my own pain that I now have at 61. I am going to allow myself the 11 years. I am going to allow myself, also, the suspicion that I had been doing, on some level, the work of survival, rather than the work of ignorance. I am going to extend that suspicion to Marilyn as well. I am going to extend it, in time, to Theo. The structure had been the structure. We had all of us done what we could inside it. The structure has now collapsed. We are going to build a new one, very slowly, on different ground. And the new one is not going to have him in it. And the new one is going to be, in the end, the more honest of the 2. If you have listened to all of this, and any part of it has felt close to a part of your own life, I want to tell you one thing before I let you go. The voicemails in your husband's phone, or in your wife's email, or in your mother's letters in the drawer of her bedside table after she dies, are not, in the end,
the worst thing that has happened to you. The worst thing that has happened to you is the 11 years you spent not listening to them. The voicemails are simply the moment the universe stopped allowing you the convenience of not knowing. The work after the voicemails is harder than you think. The work is also, in the end, the work of building the second half of your life on a more honest foundation than the first half. And a more honest foundation is, by every measure I have available to me at 61, a better foundation. Even if it is built on top of grief. Even if it is built on top of betrayal. The foundation is not retroactive. The foundation is forward. The foundation is what you do with the next 25 years, not what you do with the previous 34. The next 25 years are still yours. They are yours in a way the previous 34 were not, because the previous 34 had been, in some part, his to define, and the next 25 are nobody's but yours. That is the small, slow, surprising gift the voicemails left me. I would not have asked for the gift. I would not, in any version of my life, have chosen the way the gift arrived. But the gift, 3 months later, is real. The kettle is on. The lake is freezing over for the winter. My sister Vivian is coming up next weekend to help me close the lake house, the way she has helped me close it every October for 30 years, and the way she will help me close it for as long as I am able to drive up to it. The 2 letters from the boys are on the small writing desk in what was Theo's study and is now mine. The voicemails are still on the phone, in a small archived folder I have not deleted. I am going to keep them. They are the founding documents of the rest of my life. I am not in a hurry to listen to them again. I am also not in a hurry to forget that they exist. They exist. The truth that lived inside them was a truth I had been close to for 11 years. And the truth had only been waiting for someone to plug the phone in. I plugged it in. I am, at 61, a slightly different woman than I was 3 months ago. I am, on balance, a better one. I would not have chosen this education. I am going to use it anyway, because the alternative, at my age, is to refuse the education. And I have already spent 11 years refusing it, and 11 years was enough. My name is Constance Lockhart. I am 61 years old. I am a retired regional underwriting supervisor with a small part-time consulting role and a small steady circle of friends and an older sister named Vivian, who has, across the 3 months since the 3rd afternoon after my husband's funeral, slept in my guest bedroom for the equivalent of approximately 5 weeks of total time, and who has not, in those 5 weeks, said a single sentence that did not earn its place in the room. I have 2 letters on a small writing desk in a room that used to be my husband's study. I have a wall, in the financial paperwork of an estate I was raised to handle, that my husband built across 26 years to protect a woman in northern Minnesota and her 2 boys from any claim I might have brought against them, and that I am, in the next several months, in the process of formally dismantling, so that the household in Loon Falls can stop existing inside a structure built by a dead man who had refused, in his lifetime, to look at the structure he was building. The boys are going to be fine. Marilyn is going to be fine. I am going to be fine. None of us is going to be fine quickly. We are not in a hurry. The truth, having taken 26 years to arrive, is in no particular hurry to leave. I am going to sit with it for as long as I have. The kettle is on. The chair by the window has been mine for 34 years and is now, finally, mine in a different way. I am going to sit in it. I am going to look at the small, steady winter light coming in across the suburb. I am going to be, by the most ordinary external measure available to me, a widow, alone in a house on a Tuesday afternoon. I am not, by the measures that matter, alone at all. I have my sister. I have my old colleagues.
I have 2 letters from 2 boys I have not yet met, but who are, in some small, private way that has not yet found its name, in my life now and going to be. I have a husband who is buried in a small Lutheran cemetery in northern Minnesota, under a line of scripture he chose for himself, which I do not, today, find ironic, although on certain other days, I do. I have the underwriter's gift, which has, in the 3 months since the voicemail, been the most valuable thing I have ever inherited from any of the careers I have worked.
I have the rest of whatever time I have,
which is the only thing any of us has ever had, and which is, in the end, enough. The kettle is on. The light is coming through the window. The rest of my life starts at this kitchen table, in this chair, in this house, on this Tuesday afternoon, and it is going, however slowly, exactly where I decide.